If you believe the news, the European Union is in serious danger. In elections to the European Parliament at the end of May, anti-Europe parties in country after country had their best showing ever. Most news organizations have portrayed this as a historic victory and a serious threat to the European project. If you believe that, I've got a bridge full of unicorns to sell you, because you'll believe anything. The Eurosceptics certainly won a lot of seats, but in order to be impressed by that, you have to ignore almost everything that has happened over the past 5 years. The last European elections were held in the spring of 2009. The period since then has been the worst in the history of the European Union. Shall we review? The world economic crisis had already started by the spring of 2009. Back then, however, Europe could still tell itself that it was doing better than the US, and folks were feeling pretty confident about how their system was weathering the storm.
And I believe that we in Europe are uniquely placed to lead the world in meeting the wholly new and momentous challenges of globalization ahead.
It wasn't until a couple months after the elections that Europe really started to suffer. The past 5 years have witnessed economic stagnation, austerity, and social unrest, a lot of which can be traced back to EU-inspired financial and monetary integration. That brings us to the euro, which managed to offend pretty much everyone. For the past 15 years, the single European currency has probably been the most important EU initiative. Since 2009, the euro's critics have been completely vindicated. The single currency made it much harder for Southern Europe to respond to the economic crisis. The Greece debacle also led to resentment from the Northern European countries who had to pay to keep Europe from sinking the world economy. The crisis has also brought about a tremendous shift in power. The EU used to be a joint French-German show, but that axis has become much less important. Angela Merkel has succeeded where Bismarck, Kaiser Wilhelm, and Adolf Hitler failed. Germany is now the most important power in Europe, and German power is only going to grow. This development may have been historically inevitable, but it has only become obvious in the past 5 years. This election was an opportunity for people to object to this development. Some unfortunate timing made this vote an opportunity to protest something else. Starting in January 2014, workers from Romania and Bulgaria were granted unrestricted access to the EU economies. This is a hard sell for European countries with high unemployment, which at this point is pretty much all of them. All of the anti-EU parties were able to use immigration fears as their main selling point in the May elections. So like I said, not a great 5 years. In this election, pro-Europe politicians faced a perfect storm of economic disaster, policy failure, uncomfortable revelations, and more plausible than usual nationalist fear-mongering. The Eurosceptics were better funded and more respectfully reported on than they had ever been. So what happened? All this added up to not much. 2/3 of the people who bothered to vote came out to vote for Europe. The people still support the European project, despite 5 years of disaster and disappointment. The anti-Europe showing in the last election is not a sign of things to come. It is a high watermark. If Germany and the rest do their job and address some of the EU's problems, there is no way the next 5 years will be anywhere near as bad. This was the best the Eurosceptics will ever do. This election does not make them victors, it makes them clowns. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.
What about the Eurozone? What about the fiscal and monetary union? What about the euro? These are all issues beyond the individual economies that have to do with the regional architecture that have got to be resolved. And many say today, well, it was a failed start. You know, it's okay to call it a failed start today, but what do you do about it? So before you really start drilling down on the individual member states and some of their problems, you got to deal with the problem of Europe and what it means to be managed economically within a common market or a common framework that doesn't seem to be working out so well. So who do you call? Do you call Brussels? Do you call the nation's capital that you have queries about? You've got the overlay of 27 countries in the EU, to say nothing of the 17-member Eurozone, that each has bureaucrats in Brussels that handle the various aspects of economic trade and foreign policy. And so it's a top-heavy system, and it's really difficult to talk about how you bring back to life an individual nation state when you've got this architectural overlay that really is failing the region in a very serious way.